Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and I want to thank all of our moderators, expert guests, and solution sponsors for participating in these Inside Jam panel discussions. This has been a big year of changes with the launch of the all-new, always-on InsideJam.com community site. For the past 4 years, everyone here at Solutions Review has been leaning in to build the Inside Jam into a celebration of enterprise technology, with best practices, expert analysis, and solution showcases. And we want all of you to join us there to keep the jam going into the new year and beyond. If you haven't joined Inside Jam, please do. And if you already have, take a moment to invite some of your colleagues. And again, thank you all for being here and enjoy today's discussion.
Solutions Review presents Inside Jam, a social media community for enterprise technology. Hello and welcome to Day 3 of Inside Jam Live. My name is Jonathan Paula. I'm the Director of Multimedia and Events here at Solutions Review, and also pleased to be your MC over the next 6 hours of coverage dedicated to business intelligence, which all kicks off right now with a panel on data mesh and fabric architectures with this great group of people we've assembled from around the globe. Thank you all for being here with me, Samir, Casey, Kevin, Nick, and Russell. Let's begin the program with some short personal introductions. Tell us a bit about yourself, what excites you about today's topic. And we'll start with our moderator, Samir.
So I'm Samir Sharma. I'm the founder of DataZoom. We are a boutique consultancy that basically works in the area of data strategy and analytics, comprised of 3 pillars. First one is data strategy. How do we start to build out what the business wants to do and achieve through their business strategy with data? Then operationalizing that through operating models and executing it through platforms. And then on the final pillar is the innovation piece, which is around data science. I've had 20 years in the industry, worked across a number of different industries in various capacities. And what am I excited about today? Well, this is a massive, massive subject. New for a lot of people, but old for others who feel like they've been doing this for years. And now with the advent of so much around data democratization, LLMs, and the whole world of AI going crazy, is data mesh and data fabric still a thing? That's what I'm here to find out. Thanks a lot. And over to Casey.
Hey guys, I'm Casey Lai. I'm the CEO and founder of Prometheum. Like you, Samir, probably been in this industry for longer than I care to admit. Both as a practitioner of the analytics, as well as a vendor, as well as a builder. So played all those different roles. Started the company Prometheum about 5 years ago because I was really frustrated, but yet also passionate about how do we make it much easier for people to actually find and access data, right? And that's always been sort of our North Star. And throughout that journey, we really kind of focused on, a lot of automation, a lot of AI, to do a lot of the work that was, frankly, too hard for most of the folks who were not technical. And, we're proud to say that we're probably one of the earliest folks that actually delivered the modern data fabric. And so this is obviously a topic that's near and dear to my heart to talk about data fabric, data mesh. You're right, Samir. I think there's been a lot of innovations, especially around Gen AI, and I think it can only augment, right, data mesh, data fabric architecture. So really excited to lend my thoughts to this discussion.
Fantastic. Kevin.
Okay, so my name's Kevin Bohan. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Denodo. I'm really excited about the topic today. As part of my role, I deal with customers all the time that are implementing modern data architectures, and data fabric and data mesh seem to be at the heart of everything that they're doing. So I'm excited to hear the thoughts from the other panelists and share mine.
Great. Thank you very much. Go for it, Nick.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick Golovin. I'm founder and CEO of Data Virtuality. And the topics which drive our customers are topics like data mesh and data fabric, and this is something which we have been helping our customers to create and to build using our data platform, which on one side unites different methodologies of data integration behind the kind of virtual semantic layer, and on the other side helps the business people, the data consumers, use data better to build all those more traditional data things like reports and analytics, but also AI projects and other very, very interesting things.
Great. Thank you so much. Russell, let's hear from you.
Hi, everyone. Russell Christopher, Director of Product Strategy at Starburst Data. I've been a data person all my life. My first grown-up job was supporting Microsoft Access 1.0. So if anyone has ever put their hands on that product, that was mine. Long time at Microsoft, then early on at Tableau, data catalog startups, et cetera. I love data. Starburst is essentially a company that offers a data lake-centric analytics platform. We're a query engine that allows, whether you're doing Fabric or Mesh, we bring that all together for you. And I'm excited about this really because, I don't know if you're familiar with American politics. There's a guy named James Carville who said it's the economy, stupid, and for me it's the data, right? You can't get anything done without the data. So that's what we do.
I love it. Thank you so much, everybody. It's really fantastic to be here, and I think we've got quite a global set of panelists here today, from San Francisco all the way through to Germany, I believe, via Paris and London. So New York. So wonderful. So listen, let's kick things off. As we've all sort of agreed, data mesh, data fabric, and the acceleration of technology and everything that's happening in the data industry right now is really, it's going ballistic. This year has been nothing like I've seen before. So these two architectures are, as all of you have said, are pretty current. People are adopting. People are moving into them. We've got, on the one hand, we've got the mesh, and on the other hand, we've got the fabric. So Zhamak, Dehghani, when she was at ThoughtWorks, came up with the whole data mesh idea with the 4 platforms, or the 4 pillars, I should say, rather: domain-driven ownership of data as a product, self-serve data platform, and federated computational governance. So those are the sort of 4 pillars that we're, and I'm only sort of setting this up for some of the listeners as well, so they're getting what that is. But then on the other side, Fabric, which came about via Gartner, really, and data mesh, if you ever saw the hype cycle, didn't even feature on the hype cycle for a while. So that was really interesting. But, they're sort of terming and coined this data fabric view as, and this is from them, it's an emerging data management designed for attaining flexible, reusable, and augmented data integration pipelines, services, and semantics. A data fabric supports both operational and analytics use cases delivered across multiple deployment and orchestration platforms and processes. So just from thinking about those two areas, architectures, to me, it feels like data mesh is less of an architecture, more of an organizational challenge, and Fabric is more of an architecture, an integration. So, let's go into our first question. We've had the data warehouse, we've had relational databases, we've had distributed file systems and big data, cloud data warehouses, data lakes, lake houses. My goodness, what next? How would each of you define data mesh? The data mesh and the data fabric architecture, and why do you think that these concepts are so significant in today's current landscape of data management, analytics, and of course now AI? I'll start with Nick.
Yeah. So obviously there are a lot of things to say about both data fabric and data mesh, right? So even the definitions are a bit longish, so I will not go into detail of each definition, but I will rather talk about my subjective feeling, what's the most important. And I would agree with you, Samir, that the data mesh is probably a much more organizational thing to do. And for me as a technologist, actually, it seems a much heavier thing to implement, much harder thing to implement. But it's also very inspiring in a way. And still, this is something which cannot be seen as purely organizational, because it also requires a lot of technology support. So all those things like data platform, support for federated governance, support for data products and maybe product life cycles around the data. This is still all technology. So although the main vision is around the organizational transformation, but there's still a lot of technology involved. And talking about data fabric. So again, for me, I don't think it's really, they both contradict each other. I mean, probably it's maybe because of different authorship that they're being contrasted, but I really believe at some point they will maybe, there will maybe a joint concept or joint vision, which is uniting both of those things. Of course, data fabric for me is a lot about building this foundation, which can be combined and augmented by AI in different places and improved. So this AI aspect, this technological aspect of AI being in all the places, doing data integration, helping data integration, that's what's most important for me. Again, so that's maybe not the strict definition, but that's how I feel personally about those two things.
Yeah. So it's interesting because, Russell, from your perspective, Starburst were the people who absolutely jumped on data mesh and gave Zhamak's book away. And, I was one of the first people, not one of the first people, but I remember that. Sure. And I downloaded it from your site. So you've got a vested interest in this whole data mesh, from an organizational design perspective, but you also, now you talk about data fabric. Tell us your view on this and how it contrasts with NIC.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's about getting data to consumers, and now it's gotten to the point where data product infers a specific meaning. If I use that at a much higher level, users just need to consume data. They need to share it. They need to repurpose it. They need to be able to find it. So for me, it's not a religious issue. Sometimes sort of fabric versus mesh can become religious. From Starburst's point of view, we are almost purpose built to really make mesh a reality because of the federation that's typically involved with doing data mesh. But we have lots of folks using us as the engine for fabric as well. So as long as you're delivering on the vision of actually getting data to the people who actually use it and delivering value on the data, that's what's important.
Absolutely right. And I think we're going to come to a question about value, but Casey, I'd like to get your view on this as well. Being, you're looking at data strictly in terms of that, the finding, accessing, and providing data into the hands of those users. What's your view, and why are we in such a significant phase right now?
Yeah, I think the reason why we're in such a significant phase right now, Samir, is, you talked about earlier, hey, we've gone from RDMS to, Hadoop, right, to data warehouses, and there's logical data warehouses and so forth. So why is this such a significant shift right now? Well, I think if you look at every single one of those shifts, it requires you to literally lift and shift. It will require you to actually move and migrate your data. And we all know how expensive, how complex, how disruptive, how painful that is. What's so cool about a data fabric, if you build it right, is you don't need to do that. And that's actually one of the core tenets of a true modern data fabric is you shouldn't have to, right, create yet another silo. So I think that is what makes it super exciting, because the reason why people have done all these shifts is always, back to Russell's point, how do we get data to people quickly and add value, right? And so every time we've sort of been told, well, you can only do that if you do this lift and shift. For the first time, the fabric comes and says, actually, you don't need to do that. Actually, there is a way to keep things the way they are, and we're still going to deliver on this promise where it's as if everything was in one place that you can discover, but also access and also build together. And I think that's what makes it really interesting. And if you look at, the 4 pillars of what we consider a data fabric must have, and number one, it's got to be metadata driven, and the discovery and integration or access has to be a core backbone to that. And then it's the automation, right? How do you now use advanced concepts like active metadata to not only find but also build the data products you want? And to some of the, I think Russell, you were saying earlier, I don't know if we really need to pit data fabric against data mesh. I don't think that helps anyone, by the way. I actually think the two are very complementary. I know the Starburst guys, I've just there for many years, love what they're doing. It's basically just, depending on where you want to put the emphasis. But ideally, what we've seen with customers is if you have a strong data fabric foundation, it's much easier to get a strong and deploy a data mesh successfully, right? So we do think the two are complementary, and I hope everyone thinks that way. I really do not want to get into the religious battle because it actually doesn't add any value to anyone if you kind of start going off in that direction.
Totally agree, and I think, Kevin, from your perspective, we've got these two religious terms, and we've got these two churches. But from Denodo's perspective, how do you bring those two together, and how are you making sure that the conversation is about value?
Sure, and I fully agree with what was being said by the others. They're complementary technologies, and I think what's really driving, sort of the why. Your question had, how do you define it, but also the why. The key part is organizations are looking to be able to democratize data, have more people leveraging data to make decisions, to help drive and improve customer experience, to improve operational efficiencies, minimize risk, and ensure compliance. There's a whole lot of different activities driving it. And the key really is being able to provide this universal access layer to distributed data. And KC touched upon it. The let's bring it all together into the data warehouse or the data lake or wherever these different repositories might be. We've been doing this or attempting to do this for 30 years and it hasn't been working. Let's embrace this distributed environment. The key is being able to deliver to the data in the language of the business at the speed the business needs it. So you need to be able to provide it so it's usable by the end user. And that's the key really here. And as long as we're focusing on that, I don't think it matters whether it's a fabric or a mesh. It's what's the key principles of those architectures, or like I said, one's more of a technical architecture than others, but what are those key principles that are going to achieve that goal? And I think if a customer and vendor working with the customer focuses on that, it's a win.
Great, thank you. In terms of just the way, I think a lot of organizations that I'll speak to, that I'll have a look at their estate and what's happening. I use the term spaghetti junction. I don't know if you know what that means, but in England we have a highway system here which literally looks like spaghetti all over the place, and it just, I don't even know where to get off or how to get on. It's just crazy. I'm sure there's plenty of other examples of that around the world. But for a lot of companies have got that specific architecture in place now. You look under the hood and it's just a mess. So as companies start to embrace the idea of data democratization, which isn't new, let's face it, it's been a subject that's been around for decades now, and people have been trying to get to the utopia for a long time. From your experience, from each of your experiences, and working with your clients, what are the kind of first steps that you would suggest and help your clients to take in order to embrace these kinds of organizational changes or the architectural changes that they need to make, both either through a mesh or a fabric? Now, I'll go to Russell first on that subject. Question.
I think the first steps can be very different based on the approach. You're eventually going to hit all of the steps, but it may be an issue more of prioritization. If I'm thinking about fabric, the very first thing I need to understand is what's in my data ecosystem. I mean, what are my data sources? What are my storage systems, my data formats? Because it's highly likely you can't answer that question yet if you haven't implemented fabric. So you need to survey all of that stuff. If I'm thinking about data mesh, I'm not even really necessarily thinking about the technology and the data initially. I'm thinking about my business problems and what I'm trying to solve, and figuring out what my data domain should actually be before I even think about nuts and bolts. And then again, we've already talked about organizational shift. Casey, Nick mentioned that. It really is a cultural thing. So a really close second for mesh is it's the collaborative herding cats aspect of it in order to move things forward.
Great, thanks, Russell. Nick, from your perspective, is this cultural shift a reality for organizations, or what are their challenges when adopting these kinds of technologies?
Yeah. So let me start with data mesh, because I think I already mentioned before that I think that's actually a tougher one to handle, and this is where I see that that it's challenging to implement data mesh. I mean, on one side, it's very attractive because in some ways it really like the main ideas of data mesh are in many ways correspond to how the business wants the things to run, right? So they want the data things to be driven by business domains. So that certainly this is something they like a lot, and in many cases they support the champions for data mesh, and this is actually very good. I mean, there are of course challenges there as well. Where do I get the right people with the right skills? How do I choose the right tools? The challenges again main challenges come from the fact that it's an organizational change, right? And it's always hard to change an organization. And of course, different people, different departments in the organization, they have their roles. Maybe it's central roles. Maybe it's not necessarily the people who would be usually owning the data warehouse, or data integration initiatives before, that are kind of are maybe objecting data mesh in a way. In many cases, they are championing this, but there are other departments, for example, like procurement or compliance, and they come and say, okay, but we need to have a central perspective on different things. So these are the kind of tensions. I mean, there are productive tensions, right? There are discussions. There is like the people who are discussing the needs and of each other and getting together to a solution. But this is what we see happening on the data mesh side, whereas on the data fabric, I would say this is something which is more on the technology side. And again, it's a change of tools, it's a change of methodologies, it's a change of technical things. But I would say that in many ways, you would be getting a value a bit quicker with data fabric, just because of this being just a technology improvement and not the organizational change.
Thank you.
But still, I mean, the question is like short-term value versus long-term value. Maybe the long-term value is better with the data mesh approach.
And I think it's a good point, because there's a number of people who will say, well, actually data mesh there is nothing called a data mesh, i.e. there's no technology called a data mesh right now. It doesn't exist. And maybe Zhamak is putting that together. But Kevin, from your perspective, when you talk to your clients, and what's the springboard for them to say we need to change? But equally, you're a product company. How do you go into an organization and talk to them about culture from a data mesh perspective? And then tech is fine, because I'm sure from a fabric perspective it's okay. But what's their actual springboard in that perspective?
You mentioned, being a product company, but we take a different approach. In any project to be successful, it's going to be technology, people, and process. And what we believe really the starting point is focusing on delivering business value. Think incrementally of what project is a centerpiece or, seen as high value for the organization. Work on that, figure out what's going to have to change from an architectural standpoint, what's going to have to change as far as the people that are involved, what's going to have to change as far as the processes we have, and focus on that first data product that you're going to deliver to achieve that business goal. If you work through that, you're going to end up coming up with what works well, at least for that particular project, but probably pretty well for your organization in general, and then iterate as you do that next project. But the focus really needs to be on two things. First of all, delivering value to the business. If you show, as you start rolling out that next data product, that this previous one was able to do X, Y, and Z, you have adoption by those users a lot quicker and a lot easier. The other piece is focus on reusability, because that's where the real value comes from. If you're delivering these data products and it's only going to be used for this one particular project, then a lot of what you're doing and why you're doing it isn't going to deliver that value. So we're really from the mindset of think incrementally, use the key spirit of what a data fabric is and a data mesh is to deliver value to the business, and think of delivering that continuous value as you move on and on. By the time you deliver your second, third, or fourth data product, you're going to have a pretty good understanding of what's going to work within your organization. And one organization might have developed and deployed a perfect data fabric or a perfect data mesh or both. But it really should be focused around how you're delivering value to the business. And that's where you're going to get adoption, when you have that success. As they say, success breeds success.
That's a great point. Casey, what's your perspective on this? Because you're coming from a fabric perspective, so accessing, managing the life cycle, and then exposing that data. Where do your clients come in?
Yeah, good question, Samir. Well, first of all, I think the cultural shift actually is real. I think if you look at, say, 2021, 2022 versus now, we're seeing customers before, they kind of have heard of data fabric, but they would basically try and shoehorn it into an existing problem, right? Oh, I have a governance problem. Oh, I have a data integration problem. Oh, I have a self-service problem. What we're seeing in 2023 is people are actually just straight up coming and saying, I want a data fabric. I need a data fabric, which is actually pretty phenomenal, kind of seeing kind of that growth. And so one thing that we have seen, and we ask why, and one thing we've seen, the most common reason is there's sort of this fatigue around what was called the modern data stack, right? Which sounded great, but it meant buying 7 different products from 7 different vendors and paying a lot of money in integration and time. And so what we hear from customers over and over again is it took too much money, too much time for any promise to be delivered. And so, they're desperate to try and get to that innovation, that agility, and that speed. And so I think that cultural shift definitely is real. One of the things that we, pride ourselves in, and we think everyone should actually focus on it, is really time to value in that customer experience, right? Yeah. You talk about the spaghetti junction. If you have to say, go through another painful 9-month installation, you're not adding value for anyone. You're going to create more spaghetti on top of the existing spaghetti. So one of the things that I always challenge customers is, hey, even if you don't go with Prometheum, if you're looking for a new data fabric, you should really measure, how quickly you get that first initial value. And that first initial value should be, on day one, when I deploy my data fabric, can I actually see what I have instantly everywhere? Every data source, every file, every view, every query, every table, in an easy to discover manner, and can I access them? That should be table stakes, because if you can't get that, you have no foundation to do anything else. You're not building data products if you can't even do that, right? And then secondly, what we have learned is that, to Kevin's point, you got to start with the business problems, right? So don't magically expect, just because you put in an awesome data fabric or data mesh, that people are just instantly, do all these amazing things. No, what we have learned is you have to start with an impactful business problem that highlights the power of the data fabric. So for us, what we typically see that means is it's usually a problem where the business says, I need near real-time or real-time answers. And I can't get it because the data is spread across multiple locations and I don't have enough people to throw at it. Usually those 3 things are like the perfect recipe for that use case to be delivered. And when you can deliver that first use case very quickly, then the value, right, of the data fabric, data mesh spreads quickly. And like Kevin said, success breeds success. You now have what the CXOs were looking for. Show me that when I make a technology change, I'm going to get value realized. And when you can get that in the first month, it's pretty addictive. It's pretty powerful. And so I think this is what's exciting, right? And I think you can't talk about data fabric, data mesh without talking about Gen AI. What Gen AI has done is gotten us addicted to fast, instant gratification. I mean, like it or not, right? It made it so it became culturally acceptable. Before, data teams told businesses, you're not going to get in your real time. It's impossible. Well, regardless of how accurate Gen AI is with hallucinations, it just created that experience. And what we've seen is that has actually driven the data teams and IT to say that we must fix what we have to deliver that to the business. It's not it's a good idea. It's a cool idea. It's no, I'm being demanded to do this. So that's where we're seeing kind of the acceleration of that cultural shift.
So it's the edge kind of cases that are happening now in Gen AI that are having more of an impact, because now we need to become AI ready and get our data estates into order. Basically, that's what you're saying. That's the driver, which is a great driver, to be honest, because it's about time that there was some fire and brimstone in that area that will make the move. But look, let's get down to some practical aspects of Fabric and Mesh. Both of them are coming from a data democratization view. Both of them are coming from a let's self-serve. Both of them are coming from a product or a data product perspective. How easy is it for organizations to be shifting left? And I hear that continuously in terms of the shift left. Let's put more of the responsibilities and accountability on the business teams. So now we're doing that, and we're now, lumping a lot of the this self-serve and the thinking of what you're going to do in your domain, and having local domain teams, and now layering in so much on the organization. Do you feel that there is a preparedness from business teams to actually take on this responsibility, accountability? And I think it's one of those questions that I'm continuously asked from people out there, and we'll have the conversations. And maybe I'll go to Russell first on this. I'd like to get your take on this. Are they ready?
Not only yes, but hell yes. I mean, my experience as a reasonably successful and now sort of recovering data analyst is part of the reason why you're successful is you're ready to end run at any time the folks who are keeping your data from you. And so you never have all of the data that you actually need to answer the questions that you're being asked. It's never available fast enough. So you go out on your own, and that's why you stand up, Snowflake, or you spin up a this, that, or the other, and then you have a big mess. It's because people aren't moving fast enough. So I think moving to the left is what implicitly happens if you're too far over to the right. And it's just putting a little bit more process and making that process more forecastable and repeatable when all is said and done, and allowing the things that maybe one organization does because they have to, whether anyone likes it or not, makes that reusable for other people. So a strong yes for me. Yeah, great. I love the reusable factors, which I know Kevin spoke about before. Kevin, are you seeing this shift left being a sort of liberating factor in many organizations that you speak to?
Oh, absolutely. As Russell said, people have been looking for this for a while. I think they've been doing it, a bit of that, shadow IT and rogue IT. But what this is really about doing is making it more of a structural approach to how they're doing it, giving them the tools they need, and making sure that what they're doing in their domains or their particular groups is reusable by others within the organization. So I think what we're doing is really bringing together the best of both worlds of what we have had happen because we weren't able to respond quick enough to the demands of the business, but bringing it together so it's an organizational approach and putting more boundaries around it, guardrails around it, to make sure it is delivering on what the business is expecting, delivering the return the business is getting, but also having the proper controls and governance in place to make sure that what's happening in the fringe isn't necessarily going against any kind of policies of the organization or compliance regulations and things like that. But it's definitely something that I think most groups are looking to embrace. Now, different departments, I think, and depending on what team you're going to, have different skill sets. So you have to be flexible in how you set that up. But I think everyone's looking for a better way, and this seems to be the way that most people think is going to help address their problems.
Fantastic. So look, it sounds like we're kind of embracing it. You know, businesses are embracing it. What is the Nick? What does the data team do then? If the business team is taking a lot of the ownership, accountability, you know, what is that? You know, where does that leave the data teams? What do they do? Is it more about innovation, and you know, the mundane stuff is now done by others?
Yeah, they're doing. We see them doing different things. We see them doing different things. We see them working on the projects which address some central concerns of the organization, because there are always cross-domain things which need to be answered or solved for the organization as a whole. We also see the people from those teams going out and helping the domain teams doing their things. And also, I think for the data science teams, it was actually for a long time a best practice already to go and put data scientists next to the business so that they can understand the domains better, and they can solve the business problems better. And I think the newer thing, which is part of this moving left, is that also data engineers are getting embedded into the domain teams, and also help create and sustain those data domains. I would also absolutely agree with Russell and Kevin when they kind of describe the situation as this is something which the businesses, I mean, like this general situation, like especially with data mesh, this moving left, this is something what businesses were actually, business side was actually doing for a long time already. But just before it had a kind of bad name and was not institutionalized, was called shadow IT, but it was always helpful. That's why it was always proliferated. And now there is a way to institutionalize better, to surface better, and to help this constellation better, but at the same time also to make sure that the compliance and other company requirements are being met.
Samir,
no, that's a good point.
If I may, I'm going to just jump into what Nick said.
Sure, Russell.
You know, we're seeing the shared services teams, they do shrink a little bit. And as Nick was saying, they migrate to the actual domain areas, which is great because they get the subject matter expertise. And then again, as Nick was saying, you now have an adult in the room with the business team to make sure that you're not doing silly things that are going to burn you down the road. So it's healthy in terms of compliance. It's healthy in terms of agility from what we've seen.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole federated view, or the decentralized view, that we're beginning to cope with in terms of the organizations. But Casey, just come in and give me your spin on this, being that it's, you know, the shift left sounds like it's a new branding for just, you know, shadow IT and shadow BI. You know, the shift left movement is good, it seems.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I think no one's going to say innovation and agility is a bad thing, right? I think no one on this panel is ever going to say that. But I think there is reality that you also need to meet with, and that is like data in an enterprise. It's usually kind of messy, right? It's usually kind of complex to put together. So as much as the business wants to take matters into their own hands, and they should, there's an enabling factor that needs to happen. And data analytics has always been, I like to call it a team sport, right? Between like the people who have the domain and know what to do with it, versus like the people who actually know how to put things together. And I know the technical aspects of, I'm not going to do a Cartesian join. I'm not going to do select start all and crash my data warehouse. Like, you still need these people on the team to work together. So do I think that the data team is just going to kick back, have a margarita and have fun all day long? No, I don't. I mean, actually what we see is that they actually are much more involved, right, in addressing those use cases, those burning near real-time use cases, creating those data products faster. And they actually enjoy that more, as opposed to like, great, let me do kind of the awful stuff that I didn't really love because it was so hard to pull data. It was so hard to do all that complex ETL. So I don't think that work is going away. I think it's just highlighting and getting them to maybe shift their focus, right, in getting closer to collaboration with the business. And here's the funny thing, right? If you think about it, the enablement has done something interesting that before, without the enablement, we were limited to how much output we could give the business, right? I literally had customers tell me, I tell my customers they can ask me 4 questions the whole year. 4, because that's all I have time for. The minute this enablement happens, you get more questions, but you can answer them more, right? So the agility kicks in. So no, I don't think anyone's going on the beach. I actually think everyone gets happier because everyone likes to contribute and deliver more value to the business faster. And so it definitely is enablement, not just for the business, but also for the data teams as well.
So I love all of your responses, and I think value comes out, show me the money comes out quite a lot. Time to value, acceleration of data products, and so on. But there's something that sort of comes with each of these. One on the one side, the cultural change through Mesh, and the sort of technical and architecture change through Fabric, is the whole idea of governance. And while data governance has been, lots of data practitioners have been doing this for the last, for many decades. My goodness, I don't want to talk about how many decades they've been doing, but there is a data governance joke. If you have 3 data governance practitioners in a room, you will have 5 different opinions related to data governance. How, if we're now federating, going domain specific, pushing down the computational governance side, which is fine, we can put policies and, sort of things into tools, but the actual governance piece, the data governance piece, the natural day-to-day, which was typically done by a whole bunch of central people, how are we getting our arms around that and really making sure that we're not going to be in the Wild West again, and our data is going to be used for so many different things, but no one's speaking to each other? We talked about reusability. How do we make sure we wrap our arms around that? Casey, I'll come to you first. That's okay.
Yeah. No, look, I think you bring up a key point, and that's always the number one concern when people hear like federated access, democratized access. Like usually the data governance team is usually the first to kind of go, oh my gosh, alarm bells, bad. But I think that is just up to how you approach it, right? So the reason why it's been so hard, Samir, is because for years we've taken a piecemeal approach to our data management environment, right? Look, what do you expect when you buy 7 products from 7 different vendors integrated by a third party? It ain't going to be all that integrated, right? It's going to be tough, right? Governance is like you've started day one by making life hard for yourself. And that's why you never get off the hamster wheel. It's like this constant manual process. And if you talk to governance practitioners, one of the things that's been very enlightening recently is they're coming and telling you, I don't want to do that. Right, that's not the value added part of my job, right? It's to like manually stitch all this together. So what we believe a good Fabric foundation or Mesh foundation should have is you should be able to, from day one, incorporate the existing access controls, enterprise access controls that the customer already has. You don't want to recreate that all over again. So if you can incorporate and automate it, so that way both design time and runtime, right? You can enforce the access controls. Then federated access shouldn't worry anyone, right? And you actually get yourself out of that complex workflow of, oh, if you want something and you have to now start this workflow of contacting someone who's going to go find it, it's going to give you the access. That goes away because if you have, global discoverability with federated access, you're already limiting that user to what he or she can have access with your existing rules. So you're actually accelerating that whole process, right? So this is where I believe, right? It's a very exciting time, right? We've been talking about data analytics all along, but I believe the Mesh and the Fabric architectures actually make data governance way more automated than it's ever been. Right, and actually makes the job a lot more fun. So, but I think not everyone has that. So I think that is a key consideration when people are evaluating these technologies is, can I get the integration day one of my existing enterprise access controls? Because if you do, it's actually a pretty beautiful life.
And I've never heard anybody say data governance fun and fun in the same sentence. So thank you, Casey.
Well, I'm an XDA catalog guy, so I think it's fun.
Kevin, look, data governance is tough. I believe it is. Practitioners, tear their hair out. You can see I'm not a data governance practitioner, thank God. But where do you find the flex between the architectures and making sure that we're getting policies right with all of the compliance and new privacy laws, CCPA, GDPR, now AI layered on top. Now we're sort of federating and decentralizing all over again like we did 20 years ago. How are we going to get our arms around it and make sure that we're not on day 3 suddenly it got a lawsuit?
Sure. So I think Casey touched upon it. First of all, that you need to integrate with your existing systems. You can't start from scratch. There's too much out there. There's too complex. But by creating this logical abstraction that's going to allow you to, from a central location, gain access to any data and be able to deliver it in real time, what that also gives you is a central location where you can govern and secure the data as well. So if you're leveraging capabilities like attribute-based access controls, so now these domain teams can leverage the expertise they have in being able to identify personal identifiable information or PHI or other sensitive data, and they tag it as such. Your central teams can define those rules that are going to ensure that you're complying with data sovereignty rules of the EU, or that you're dealing with other regulations, whether whatever region you're working in. So you can leverage the expertise of the domain teams, but also leverage the expertise of the governance team that you have in place. So it's really trying to get the best of both worlds. Have the subject matter experts understand the data, what information's in there and how to protect it. And then what you can do, again, leveraging things like attribute-based access controls, where you can see if users are trying to access it, that they're outside of a particular region where the data sovereignty rules would kick in, or other things like that. So I think there's a number of new advancements coming from a whole bunch of different areas, but the whole concept of centralizing data access also allows you to centralize the data governance as well, and it significantly simplifies it for the organization.
So it's interesting what you say, because from a mesh perspective, we're pushing down data into the domains. Each of the domains are having their own, they're building their own data products. Maybe there's some sharing between the two. So Russell, from your perspective, how do we make sure, not just through the technology, but through people, and the good old days of data governance, where we had policy documents and so on? How do we make sure that stays and that remains in terms of this cultural shift to a domain-specific view and a sharing, of data, and making sure that we do have, customers is the good old days of making sure the master data is there and people are using the right data sets and they're not abusing those data sets. I think and then who owns this data. Do we not get into difficulties there as well if we're looking domain specific?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of defining what is a customer, that there's always going to be friction there, and what attributes make up a customer. That's going to be iterative, and I don't think you're ever going to say we're at a point where we're done. So I think trying to solve for that up front is probably a waste of time. You make sure you're directionally correct. You answer what you can, and you modify your approach as necessary. In terms of the domain-oriented data and how we govern it, I do think technology actually there it can really move that along for you. Kevin mentioned, KC mentioned in passing, each one of those domains may have their preferred way of doing things. And so the data platform itself, if I'm augmenting data on the lake, well, then I better be able to speak lake formation. And if I have some folks on legacy Hadoop, then I better need to integrate with Privacera or Ranger or whatever the case may be. So as long as your data platform is able to layer those various capabilities together, you already have a pretty good start, and you are going to be constantly negotiating on who that customer is, and that's just sort of a fact of life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense, and I think technology can definitely help for some of the constraints that we've seen previously, and you know, all of the sort of access controls. But Nick, from your perspective, data governance has been an art. You know, we'll probably have Dharma wading in at some point saying, no, you know, we can't go federated because data governance has got to be tightly controlled, and we've got to have a wheel and so on. How easy or difficult is it for your clients to move from that kind of old style of data governance into this new world?
That's a challenge. So if I may answer this very short with the one word, it's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, we are trying to help also different parties, different vendors, different technologists out there. They're trying to help. There are all kinds of ways to help out, but that's not easy. I mean, this is this centralized function, which is very much under pressure because of this decentralization, right?
Yes.
So that's a challenge.
And so
I think it might be a whole different topic or adjacent, but like I think this is where data contracts actually become very interesting and very helpful. Because with data contracts, if you can actually make integrated and automated data contracts, then you can still allow for the federated access, but with controls, right, to make sure it doesn't violate corporate policy. So that's something to think about.
Absolutely, I agree, and I think there's different ways you could skin a cat, as they say. So there's going to be a lot of people, you know, watching this right now, and they're thinking, okay, I've got this, you know, I'm in Spaghetti Junction world, and I've got to sell this stuff to my board or to my C-suite. Give me, you know, for each of you, give me one or two sort of views of how you would sell this to make sure that they can, you know, get the funding, but how should they really approach this as a conversation in the C-suite, given that we are now at that point where everybody knows what AI is, but data is still like, you know, this weird, you know, everybody thinks that AI is going to be done, but actually it's all the data that really, you know, propels it and moves it. So how do the data leaders of today start to sell this new technology? No, I mean, not so new, but new sort of ways of working. Nick, how do you approach that subject with your clients? How do you get them to sell that in?
Yeah. So that's actually very easy, because our answer is, or our suggestion is always very similar. Go find the use cases, and sometimes those can be isolated just to prove the change of the strategy. But sometimes the change of the strategy is already floating around in the organization, but still you need concrete business cases to get you started. So this would be kind of our R&O to get the sell.
Okay, and Kevin, what's your view on that in terms of the value and the ROI?
Sure, and I agree fully with what Nick was saying, and I mentioned that earlier. Look for that business use case, and that's key. But you were specifically asking around also, you know, how do you sell it to the C-suite? It's going to vary depending on who you're talking about. CIOs and the heads of data and analytics probably going to be thinking about, you know, the utilization statistics and adoption rates, where CMOs, chief revenue officers, is going to be thinking more around revenue-related numbers, effectiveness of campaigns, churn of the customers, NPS scores. It's like they all have their different data points, and the chief data office, compliance officers have their other points. They all have their different pieces of data, the key performance indicators that they're interested in. And if you can show them how they're going to be able to answer the questions that they have more quickly, more effectively, using more of the data, I think that you're going to show them that this is going to deliver the value they're looking on. And then you better deliver on it too.
Well said, one and all. I want to prompt some self-promotion as we close out the show here. Let's start in reverse alphabetical order. Russell, we'll have you go first. 30 seconds or less. Give the audience some place to go after this panel's over, whether you want to plug your LinkedIn profile, your company solution, a podcast, or a blog. Floor is yours, 30 seconds or so.
Sure. Well, I'm going to talk about Starburst, of course. For those who aren't familiar with it, we are a single platform to help you activate all of the data in and around your lake. We believe strongly that we're moving into a time where your data can and should be in a lake or lake house with ancillary satellite capabilities to deal with situations where you need to treat data in a different way. So I'd invite you to jump out to starburst.io and read more.
Excellent. Thank you. Nick, how about you?
Yes. I would like to bring up our data virtuality platform, which is a platform centered around data virtualization technology, but featuring on one side a large number of different data integration methodologies, from real-time data access to ETL, EOT, to change data capture to streaming, to help the technologist and the IT people in the organization to connect to different storages, to different systems in their own best way. And on the other side, featuring a centralized virtual data access layer for the data domains, for the data consumers, for the different use cases. So what we see happening in the industry is that on one side is the number of technologies on the data side is exploding, and also that the number of use cases, number of business people who want to use the data is also exploding. And we strongly believe that the topic of how do we best provide access to all of this data to all of those business people and use cases should be separated from the question, where do you actually store the data? So you can store the data in any place, you can integrate it and move it or not move it in different ways. The most important is to give access to the business.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick. Kevin, and let's try to keep these under 30 seconds, please.
Sure. So what Denodo offers is a universal semantic layer that allows you to access data regardless of where it resides, what format it's in. And what we do is we deliver the data in the language of the business at the speed the business needs it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Casey.
Great. Yeah, I think just kind of three things I'll leave the audience with. One is that I really think people should stop thinking about Fabric and Mesh as being against each other. You can have data mesh in a well-orchestrated, well-built data fabric, and it can be integrated. So I think that's key, and especially with Prometheum, that is key. The other is we absolutely should get on the Gen AI bandwagon, because there's so many studies now. It's irrefutable, the value that adds, but it's hard to implement. And that's where I think Gen AI is like the killer app for data fabric, because you've got one API call that the LLM needs to make, and you don't have to compromise data access and sending data to the LLM. So I think that's really key. And then the third thing is, in looking at these type of architectures, data fabric or data mesh, it's really, really important to actually consider cost savings as well as the business agility. Yes, we talked about the use case, but I think in today's economy, if you can't show displacement, right, of existing solutions, if you can't show a reduction in compute and so forth, then it's going to be hard to justify, right? So going back to the selling point, I think a good data fabric can actually show a strong business case in terms of hard dollar savings. So that's something I love everyone to kind of think about. And you can get more information on our website at prometheum.ai.
Thank you. And Samir, real quick, final thoughts.
Sure. Three things. One, we can help you put your data and AI strategy together so you can do all those great things. The second thing is you can reach me on LinkedIn. Easy, Samir Sharma, and you'll see me. And the third thing is that I run the Data Strategy Show podcast. You can come and listen to all of my seasons. We're on season 3 now. So that's it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, one and all. Really appreciate your time and expertise over the last hour. That will wrap up this panel, but I hope you stay tuned to the Solutions Review YouTube and LinkedIn channels as we continue all of our business intelligence insight throughout the day. And coming up next, we have a panel on how to use AI to enhance data engineering. You don't want to miss that, so stay tuned. And until then, thank you for watching and listening. My name is John, and I hope to see you next time.